Hey guys, Sean here, and welcome to the F1 Word. Now, in case you somehow managed to miss it, Lewis Hamilton is leaving Mercedes at the end of the year and will be driving for Ferrari in 2025, having activated a break clause in his contract, a contract that was only announced in August last year, if you remember. That all means there is a vacant seat at Mercedes alongside George Russell next season and some pretty big boots to fill. But what are the Silver Arrows options for 2025 and beyond? And for the record, I don't expect this to be decided anytime soon. Mercedes actually have the luxury of time, and any driver 100% interested in that seat is not going to sign a deal elsewhere until they know what Mercedes are doing for next year. Okay, internally they might have a rough idea which way they're going to go and could announce something early, but I really doubt that, and I think this will rumble on for quite a while yet. But with all that said, in this video, I'm going to go over some of the drivers who I think will be on the team's list before letting you know who I put in that car if I was team principal at Mercedes. A terrifying thought for Merc fans, I'm sure. It should be said as well, on the subject of the team boss, that Toto Wolff has hinted or even suggested that he would have potentially been looking at the likes of Charles Leclerc and Lando Norris had they not agreed new deals recently. So pretty bad timing all round for Mercedes, really. But let's have a look at the possible list of replacements in no particular order. So first up is the most obvious, and that is Carlos Sainz. Most obvious, just to confirm, does not mean most likely. The Spaniard is now looking for a drive after Ferrari chose to sign Hamilton and re-sign Leclerc over the winter, and Mercedes could do a lot worse, quite frankly. Sainz had a strong 2023 and has proven time and time again that he is a rapid driver. And the reality is he wasn't dropped from Ferrari due to a lack of form, speed, experience or professionalism, nothing like that. He was just a victim of the circumstances, and it was actually reported very widely at the time that had Lewis Hamilton said no to the Scuderia, the team would have been more than happy to keep Sainz for at least another year. He's a driver who consistently delivers, has always been regarded by every team he's raced for as a great team player in terms of working with engineers and with teammates. I was also reading, funnily enough, a couple of weeks ago that he has a good relationship with Toto Wolff, so that could work in his favour too. Oh, and there is the fact he was the only non-Red Bull driver to win a race in 2023, so put that together with his strong season overall, his stock is pretty high right now. Putting him alongside Russell for 2025 and potentially beyond would create a very strong lineup, but would it only be a short-term deal due to the likelihood as of today that a certain Mercedes Jr. could be promoted by the team soon? More on that later in the video. We joked on a live stream last week that Fernando Alonso was probably the first person on the phone to Toto Wolff after the news broke. And whilst the comment was a little bit tongue-in-cheek, it is highly likely he or his management team have at least asked a question or thrown his hat into the ring. Alonso will be 43 at the start of next season, so isn't likely to hang around for another 3, 4, 5 years for Aston Martin to maybe start fighting for titles and wins if that ever happens. And although Mercedes have struggled over the last 2 years, I don't think it's controversial to say that they are better placed to at least give Fernando the chance to add to his 32 F1 wins than Aston are. Alonso to Mercedes would also give the team a bit more wiggle room in their medium and long-term planning because he's not going to be sticking around for the next decade or anything like that. That's going to allow them to assess junior driver options to see how the market plays out ahead of the regulation change. There is no denying that Alonso is still one of the best on the grid and he delivered some fantastic performances last season. He is still super quick and his experience could prove invaluable, sort of replacing the experience they will lose with Hamilton when he leaves. Yeah, we know the Spaniard is very happy at Aston Martin though, so he may well want to stick around, but his contract is up at the end of this year, and if his current team doesn't deliver, surely he'd consider a switch to the Silver Arrows. The third one on my list is Alex Albon. He's got to be on Mercedes' list as well as potential Hamilton replacement, surely. Since his return to F1, he has continued to grow and develop very nicely as a driver and has been delivering some excellent performances and results. He's another one who has demonstrated some very good speed and consistency and has done a great job helping to lead Williams over the last couple of years. It still feels as well, to me at least, as though there is more room to grow as well and he's a little bit of a way off his ceiling yet. He also gets on well with George Russell, so there's no need to worry about any tension between the two drivers if they were teammates, initially at least. It does have to be said, he does have a deal with Williams to the end of 2025, something James Vowles was clear about during the team's 2024 launch, but that could just be him setting out his stall in preparation for approaches from other teams, a sort of if you want him, it's going to cost you kind of thing. And as we've seen many times before, and as we saw just a week ago, there is always a way out if the right offer comes along and the right clauses are activated. And hey, if Mercedes did desperately want Albon, they could offer Williams, Vettel or Antonelli for a few years on a very cheap deal or for an engine discount, something like that, you never know. The point is, whilst I stop short of saying contracts aren't worth the paper they are written on, there is always a way out if the price or the clause is right. I do actually think Albon would be a cracking signing for Mercedes, and although a huge part of me would like to see him stay at Williams and lead that team going forward, it would also be good to see him get another chance at the sharp end of the grid. Ultimately, though, I suppose any potential exit will be dependent on whether or not Williams are able to give him a good car and take a step forward, as well as how good that Mercedes offer is if it comes. Here's one for you. What about Daniel Ricciardo? It might seem a bit far-fetched, and it is probably far more likely that if he is going to move, it will be to the main Red Bull team. But he showed last season, at Mexico in particular, that he still has the speed and the ability to race towards the sharp end, even in a car that was far from being a front runner. Signing him could also give Mercedes a really solid lineup, and he has been linked with the team more than a few times in the past. Much like Alonso, he would replace some of that experience the team is losing. He could also be a short-term option as well if they want to give their juniors a bit more time to develop. On paper, he ticks a lot of boxes, but I will be amazed if he is snapped up by Mercedes for next season. Esteban Ocon is also a name that has been doing the rounds since the announcement Hamilton is leaving was made, and it is understandable given his relationship with Toto Wolff and the fact he was once a Mercedes junior who was touted as a possible option for the team in the past. However, whilst he is now an F1 race winner and he has absolutely driven well for Renault and Alpine, same team, different name, I'm not totally sold on this one either. I don't think he'd be a bad pick. He's got a fair bit of experience under his belt now, for example, but I doubt he's going to be high on that list when you consider some of the names I've already thrown out there. And that's not to dismiss him as a driver, not at all, as I've already said he's done well at Alpine. Now, I've left this pick more or less last on my list for a reason. Not because he's the least likely, but because in some ways he kind of holds the key to this whole decision. And that pick is Andrea Kimi Antonelli. He is a Mercedes junior and is highly rated by the manufacturer, so much so that they have fast-tracked him all the way to Formula 2, skipping series like Formula 3, for example. Mercedes clearly see him as one for the future and obviously want to get him in that car sooner rather than later, and Toto Wolff has even said, or at the very least hinted, that the team could make a bold decision for next season. That might well be Antonelli. If he continues to develop well and has a solid season in F2, why not put him in that second seat for next year? Sure, Antonelli will only be 18 at the start of 2025, and there is no denying it would be a massive risk, but if there's a good chance he'll be in that car the following year anyway, what's the point in waiting? Mercedes are already in a rebuilding phase, with 2026 offering up an opportunity with those new rules to turn things around, and so I don't see why they wouldn't put him in the car for 25, give him a year to get up to speed and to settle and learn the ways of F1 and certain tracks he won't have raced on before, all in preparation for 2026, all of that assuming, of course, he does well in F2 this year. I just don't think I understand the point in signing what would be effectively a stopgap driver like Sainz or Albon if they're going to bump him up a year later anyway. The only thing is, Mercedes have been conservative in the past when it comes to moving junior drivers to the team. Even Russell did 3 years at Williams. So it will mean a change of tack when you consider that given how highly rated he is, if Mercedes don't sign him up, somebody else might. Think about Norris to McLaren and the Red Bull interest a few years ago, that kind of thing. Before I get to my pick, here are a few honourable mentions, names I think will be on the list but probably not the top priority for the team. Mick Schumacher was the team's reserve driver last year and will be again this year alongside his WEC commitments, and the team have apparently been pretty impressed with him as well. The idea of putting him in that seat isn't totally beyond the realm of possibility, but with respect, there are better options with, if you like, stronger CVs and a lot more experience that would probably be better picks for the team, but a Schumacher on the F1 grid again in a Mercedes would be a nice story though. I just don't see it. Frederic Vesti missed out on the F2 title last year, but still had a really good year overall. He delivered some excellent performances and picked up a very strong 6 wins over the course of the season. However, despite all of that, I still think he would be an unlikely signing for Mercedes, not least because Antonelli already appears to have jumped him on the team's list of preferred junior driver options. So maybe a seat somewhere like Williams will be his best bet. And my final honourable mention is Sebastian Vettel. There is a huge part of me that would love to see him back, even if just for a year or two, but I think the links we are seeing are largely heart over head, if I'm being honest. He would bring a ton of experience, and I'm sure the move would be tempting for him. I just don't see it happening. I actually think if he did decide to return at some point in the future, it's more likely we'd see him at Audi in 2026 and Mercedes in 2025. That, though, is a topic for another day. I'd also quickly argue that whilst they do have recent new deals in place, and going back to the point I made about Albon, there is always a way out of a deal, so I don't totally write off Norris or Leclerc, but I'd be very shocked if they suddenly change their minds, and I'm 99.99999% sure they'll be staying where they are next year. Never say never in F1 though is my point, I suppose. And yeah, Valtteri Bottas could be a possibility as well, given he did actually leave on fairly good terms and has since said that there are no burnt bridges between him and Mercedes. He did well for the team whilst he was there, so he'll probably be an option as well. Yes, I realise I've listed the majority of available drivers in this video in one way or another, but that's kind of the point. Mercedes will largely have the pick of the field to fill that seat, and so it could be anyone on the grid who isn't tied down to a deal, or even a returning driver like Sebastian Vettel, for example. But I would say, as of today, and it could all change in a few weeks' time, so remember that if you're watching this in May, but as of today, Sainz, Alonso, Albon, Ricciardo, Ocon and Antonelli currently seem like the most likely options to me, some more so than others as I've already gone over. So, the question is, who would I pick then? Well, to be clear, this isn't me saying who I think it will be, because quite frankly, I really have no idea. It could go either way, but as I said at the start of the video, it's who I'd go for if I was the team boss making the call. I do have two answers for this, but it is actually still quite simple. If Kimi Antonelli has a good season in F2, I'd probably sign him up and get him in that seat in preparation for the big rules change in 2026. And by good season, I don't mean winning the F2 title. I don't think he has to do that in his first season in the series. That could be tough given the big step he's taken. That's not to say he can't do it, of course, but I reckon good solid growth, plenty of demonstrations of his speed, and maybe a top 3 finish in the championship might just be enough to convince Mercedes, or in this case, in this fantasy world I'm living in, me, that he's the real deal and worth taking a chance on. However, if he does not do any of that and finds his first year in F2 tough, I'd be looking for a short-term signing that can fill that seat until Antonelli is ready or some other more long-term option becomes available. And that driver, for me, would be Fernando Alonso. By the way, Alonso fans, I'm not saying he's only good as a stopgap, not at all, but if they need someone short-term, he is the way to go in my view. As I said earlier, he'll replace all of Hamilton's experience and more. He is still absolutely rapid and capable of some huge performances, has lost none of his ability to fight at the front, and just feels like the perfect ready-made choice, again in the short to maybe medium term to partner George Russell. Those are just my thoughts and suggestions though, and I'm sure you will come up with plenty of other options too, so let me know who you think will partner George Russell at Mercedes next season in the comment section down below, and who would you pick if you had the power to make the decision? That is it for this one then, but I will be back soon with some more content. In the meantime though, if you did enjoy this one, then please do leave a like and consider subscribing so you don't miss out on any future videos or streams. It really does help me out more than you know. I'm back for 2024 now, so lots to come. But as ever, thank you for watching. I've been Sean, this has been the F1 Word, and until next time, goodbye.